Great. Okay. So like I mentioned, we're going to talk about introduction to ABAP and working towards a clean core. And I think we're going to look at the basic principles because these terms get thrown around a lot, right? We hear about this quite often, and I don't think that we actually take the time to understand what we're talking about and what it actually means and practical terms. As a developer, as an ABAP developer coming from the classic ABAP world, what does all of this mean for me and how do I get started, right? So that's what we're going to discuss today. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the agenda. It's going to be a very interactive session, so it's going to be more of a conversation, but basically I'm hoping to cover introduction to clean core concepts and ABAP Cloud, and then we're going to talk about the general architecture and design principles, the key features, and then best practice, and then how do you actually get started, right? How do you apply this into your day-to-day development, and especially if you don't have access to S4 system that already has ABAP Cloud on it, how do you get started and how do you make the most of the resources that you have available to you? Okay. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the objectives, but basically those are the objectives and we will revisit them right at the end. Okay. So I think the first thing that we want to chat about is this clean core, right? Like we hear a lot about clean core and sometimes it doesn't really make sense. What are we talking about when we talk about clean core? And hopefully in the next few minutes, we'll just get an understanding of what exactly is clean core. And I think we need to break it down first before we talk about clean core. What is this core that we keep on referring to? And SAP has a very nice description, basically explaining what the core is, right? And I've just taken an extract of some of the definitions that they have. And what was surprising to me first when I saw this was that in my head, I've always thought of the core as your system, right? Like your S4 system or your success factor system. But the core is more than just that, right? It's more than just the software that you make use of, but it's everything else that basically makes that software available to you. So it's the software stack itself. So that talks about your ERP system or your S4 system or whatever system that you are on, the database that supports that system, but it's also the extensibility or the functionality that you've added to that software stack. So the functionality that you've added to that standard software, that forms part of your core as well. And then it's the integrations that you have or that you've built to interact with your software. And then it's the processes as well. So not just the technology, but the processes that you use in your organization. So that talks to the core as well. And then it's the data that you have stored. So your configuration data, your master data, and your transactional data, all of that basically forms part of your core as well. And then it's the operations, how you govern your system, the governance and maintenance activities that you carry out, how you do your stuff, when do you do your upgrades and all of that, how you basically operate the solution. So those components basically make up your core. And when we talk about clean core, we essentially talking about not just the software component of this, but the entire core, meaning that the processes, the data, and the operations as well. All of that needs to be taken into consideration. So even though we're not going to spend too much time on the other stuff, I just thought that it will be useful for us to get a good understanding of what all of this means. And it's always good to understand what all of the components that are involved in this thing so that when you do your planning as well, because I know that a lot of organizations are migrating to S4, to private and public cloud and all of that. And it's always good to get a proper understanding of what's expected of you as a developer. And especially if you're playing a role that's leading some of these conversations, it's good to have a basic understanding of all of these things. Okay. So that's basically what the core is, right? So now we're going to talk about clean. So what does clean actually mean? So now we understand what the core is. Now let's talk about what is clean. What does it actually mean to keep your core clean or keeping the core clean? So these are some of the things that make part of the clean core, keeping your core clean. It's keeping your system up to date. So your system is up to date, can easily adopt the latest SAP updates or patches. There's no hectic upgrade projects that you need to carry out whenever you need to put in updates. Your system is transparent, right? So it's transparent in the sense that you have a good understanding of all the customizations and configurations that you have in place on your solution. So as the owner of the system, you know exactly where there's customizations, where there's enhancements, and you've got a roadmap or a plan that you've put in place for migrating those and making those clean. So it's transparent, you know where you are. It's unmodified, so you don't have modifications to SAP standard. You keep into SAP best practice, and you don't go around modifying SAP objects. And then it's consistent, so consistent in the sense that the processes and how you use your system is basically consistent throughout the landscape. So you don't do things differently in one module and then do things differently in another. So you basically apply the same principles, use the system in the same way. That way you can sort of get a template going out when you do your migration and you start moving to cloud and you have to rewrite some of your logic. You've got a nice template that you can make use of, and you can reuse that throughout your landscape. And then obviously we talk about efficiency, and efficiency talks about optimized for performance without excessive overhead, and basically your customizations, how you've implemented them and how you make use of them, and also your processes, not just the tech side of things, but also your processes as well. How you make use of the system plays a huge role. And then the last part is cloud compliant. So this is fairly, it's no longer new, but for people who are still on this path of migrating, it's fairly new. And that's why we're going to talk about things like ABAP Cloud and all of that. But basically, being cloud compliant means that you adhere to principles that SAP puts out for cloud solutions. And you think about things like scalability and security, and you try and standardize the APIs that you use, for example. And we'll cover all of that at a later chapter, but basically cloud compliance is you thinking ahead now, not just in terms of what you have on your on-prem system, but the future and how you would carry this out when you get to that stage. Okay. Okay, so I've taken a screenshot of this because this actually gives you a nice summary now of combining what we've learned in terms of what is the core, and then what is a clean core now. So now, if you look at the elements that we have on the left, so those are the things that basically make up your core. It's your software stack, extensibility, integrations, data, processes, and operations. And on the right, you then have the criteria for what defines your system as clean for each of these components. So I'm not going to go through this, but I thought this is very useful in sharing, because these are the type of things that you need to start thinking about now. Even if you're not going cloud as yet, it will probably happen in the near future. And you need to start thinking about how you actually improve how you do things currently, so that when the day comes for you to migrate, it's not a headache. So the idea is that you start prepping for your system and making it clean. And then when the time comes, you'll be able to then migrate your system accordingly without too many hassles. Okay, so like I mentioned, the slide just gives you a nice overview of what it means to be clean, basically, for each of those components that are on the left. Okay. Okay, so these are some of the guiding principles that you can make use of for maintaining a clean core system. And there are things that you must avoid. There are things that you must be aware of. And then there's the concept of being cloud ready. And then there's the concept of decoupling as well. And we're going to spend a bit of time talking about the decoupling bit just now, but let's start with the other stuff. So in terms of things that you must avoid, these are now the obvious stuff, right? Avoid extensions where it's not necessary. So if it's not necessary for you to do an extension or to change stuff, don't do it. Make use of SAP standard, explore what SAP provides, and try and use SAP standard as much as possible. Even if you're writing custom code, you don't have to reinvent the wheel and rewrite things that SAP already provides. Rather find a library or a class or a function module or something that already does what you are trying to do and make use of it. Right? That's gonna save you a lot of headaches in future. And it makes you productive as well, right? Because you don't have as much code coverage that you need to test and account for, because you're making use of standard components that are available already in the system. Okay. And then be aware. So know what's your technical debt, know what's happening in your system. And like I mentioned in the previous slide, know where you've got enhancements, know where you've got modifications, and put a plan in place to say, how do I get this to a more cleaner state? How do I get this from being not so clean to being super clean? And how do I get rid of all these modifications and stuff? So don't leave that until the very end and avoid introducing a new technical debt. Rather, put a plan in place for getting it resolved and clearing your technical debt. And clearing technical debt is not an easy thing to achieve because in most cases, it's not a priority for business. And us as developers, we sort of have to push the agenda and make sure that technical debt is taken into consideration. And it's something that, we make time for it and we actually get to do it. So it's important, get your technical debt in order, try and clear it as much as possible. And then the next thing is being cloud ready. So we're going to talk about things like rep and how you can start already thinking about how you do your builds, basically. For anything new that you're introducing in the system, start thinking about the cloud and being cloud ready and do things in such a way that when it's time for you to actually migrate, it won't be as much of a headache. Okay, and then the last bit is decoupling. So decoupling talks about leveraging BTP for innovation. And this is a very good thing to start exploring, especially if you are in an environment that's not cloud ready, or if you're on ERP or ECC and you want to start playing around with ABAP Cloud and making use of the innovative stuff that's happening on BTP, because there's quite a lot happening on BTP. And if you want to be in a position to start introducing those innovations into your environment, but your system is not ready yet, then BTP is a nice way to start experimenting, and not just experimenting, but actually decoupling and building stuff on BTP using ABAP Cloud without having to move your entire system if it's not possible currently. Okay, and we'll spend a bit of time talking about that at a later stage. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so extensibility, that's a very big thing, right? And I mean, extensibility is very important for all organizations. It's what we do all the time. We have to sort of give business the competitive edge, and it always boils down to extensibility and building something on top of the functionality that SAP provides. And this next image basically gives you a nice illustration of why we tend to have these extensions, because if you look at, let me just move my mouse here. Hopefully you can see my cursor. So on the left-hand side, this is the scope that SAP delivers. And this is your standard functionality that comes out of the box. So if you are on an HR system, this would be your modules that are provided, or if in a finance system, it's the same thing, right? It's the standard functionality that SAP provides out of the box. And on the left-hand side, it's the required scope. So this is what your business needs. These are the stuff that your business feel that they need to be able to function. And then in the middle is the sweet spot. So this is the covered scope. This is the stuff that SAP provides, and it's the stuff that your business needs. So this is the optimal space where you don't have to do anything besides activating standard functionality, doing some config to get it going. But otherwise, that's about it, right? But most of the time, you find that there's a differentiating scope that is unique to your business. And that's what gives your business the competitive edge. It's stuff that they do that makes them successful. And all businesses have this, right? Otherwise, businesses would be doing the exact same thing all over. So the differentiating scope is where the extensibility comes into play. And it's why we've got jobs. It's because we need to be able to provide that unique source to business. We need to be able to provide that differentiating scope, and how we do it is very important, right? So it's not like in the old classic ABAP world where you literally just went into the system and started coding, right? You need to start thinking a bit differently now that we are in this cloud era. Okay, so that's the differentiating scope. And then let's talk about classic extensibility. So this is where most of us started. This is what we know, and this is how we used to do things, right? We used to go into SE80, SE38, and start creating reports, start creating function modules and things like that, and extensions and all of that. So that is changing, right? So there's a lot of disadvantages in terms of how we used to do things in the classic ABAP world. And we'll talk about the disadvantages shortly, but there's quite a lot that's changing in that space. And for us, the people who grew up with this and who've been using this for a while, it's a bit of a mind shift that needs to happen to migrate to start using the new stuff, and not only to start using the new tech, but to actually start thinking differently in terms of how we do things, So these are the bad parts, right? So these are the things that we tend to suffer from. So upgrades are always a project. That's always a thing, right? There's always an upgrade project that needs to be implemented, and it's not easy to upgrade systems because a lot of stuff has been changed. There's modifications, there's bodies, there's things that need to be taken into consideration, and adapting new stuff is not as easy. But a typical example of things that I remember that used to happen quite often is when the Fiori stuff came out for SAP HR a while back. There was a lot of interesting things that we wanted to implement on the Fiori side, but we simply couldn't implement them at that time because the system was not in the correct support pack level, and implementing that support pack level was a project on its own. So that ends up delaying the business from getting functionality that they need because there's a complex upgrade project, and that happens quite often, right? So those are the not so nice stuff that classic extensibility puts us in. So those are the stuff that we want to avoid now going forward and going into cloud as well. So there's always high maintenance as well. There's a lot of technical debt, and then there's performance impact as well, because if things are not done properly and you're changing stuff in substandard or implementing bodies incorrectly, that always has impact on the performance of the system, not just your custom code, but substandard code as well. And then obviously it's 100% not compatible with cloud environments, because in cloud, especially in public cloud, some of these things are just not possible. It's not a case of they are not recommended. They are just not possible because public cloud does not allow that. Uh, so those are the bad parts. Those are the things that we sort of need to move away from us, the classic developers. And I'm saying us because I still think of myself as a classic developer as well. And these are the things that we need to learn and start shifting our minds and moving away from creating Dimpo screens with Screen Painter and all of that, to move to Fiori and CDSs and things like that. So let's move on to the next slide. So this now talks about the transition to clean extensions, or transitioning to clean ABAP, basically. So very important stuff that we need to start thinking about. So we need to adapt a policy of zero modifications, meaning that you don't just do modifications, we eliminate enhancements and redundant stuff that you do in the system. You use released APIs, and we're going to talk about released APIs and what that means shortly. And then you leverage things like key user in-app extensibility if you are on S/4HANA Cloud. And then obviously, if you've got the capability, you can then also use a business technology platform to build extensions, or side-by-side extensions, basically, on BTP, and then use CPI for your integration. So some of these things won't really be possible if you're still on ERP and you're not on cloud, but you can start introducing these. Like, for example, like I mentioned, the whole side-by-side extension where you get the Steampunk instance on BTP. You can actually start doing your cloud stuff from there. And going that route doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to discard whatever you build there, because that can also be used with your S/4HANA system once you do your migration and you move to either private or public cloud with that. Okay. Okay, so like I mentioned, some things are just not possible. Like, for example, if you're on public cloud, there's no modifications. You can't change substandard code because it's public cloud and you get upgrades quite regularly. You don't have upgrade projects like you currently have. And then if you're still on private cloud or on-premise with your S/4HANA system, then you must only use stable public APIs that SAP has released, and then avoid making modifications and then use extension points where possible, but try and avoid unnecessary changes in your system. Okay. Okay, so this covers the extensibility model from an S/4HANA point of view. There's basically two personas. It's the key user and it's the developer. So the key user, it's almost like configuration. It's in-app extensibility that you do where you can adapt things like screen layout, add custom fields, add custom business logic, minimal custom business logic, and then you can also add a bit of validation and stuff like that. But the bulk of us, we play the role of the developer when it comes to the two personas for extensibility. So this talks to in-app extensibility. So these are the extensions that you do within your S4 system, basically. And then next to that, you then have the ABAP side of things, which is your on-stack extensibility within your S4 system as well. So this is basically when you have your Steampunk instance that's running within your S4 HANA system, and then you can actually have access to proper ABAP development there, but obviously using ABAP Cloud, and I've put a smiley face there just to highlight that this is when now we're gonna start talking about ABAP Cloud. And that's when concepts like rep comes into the picture. And then you actually get to do proper ABAP development then. And then the alternative is then your side-by-side extensibility or side-by-side extensions. And side-by-side extensions are very powerful. It's a very cool concept that actually helps you build very interesting solutions. And this is actually applicable not just from an ABAP point of view, but you can actually use other languages as well. Like, for example, in Cloud Foundry environment, you can use Java, you can use Node.js using CAP, which is a model that SAP came out with for building applications in Cloud Foundry and also in Kima as well. So Kima is also another runtime that SAP has on BTP, and it's more like Kubernetes. If you're familiar with things like Kubernetes and running Docker images and things like that, it's more like that, and it gives you a bit more flexibility than Cloud Foundry, and you can also build your extensions there. And then obviously there's the SAP BTP ABAP environment, and another interesting thing is most of the time when people talk about ABAP Cloud, people actually think that you're referring to the SAP BTP ABAP environment or Steampunk, which is another name for that environment. But actually, ABAP Cloud is something else, and we're going to talk about what ABAP Cloud actually means. So ABAP, BTP ABAP environment is basically a runtime. It's an ABAP runtime environment that SAP provides, and it actually allows for you to then build your custom solutions in a decoupled manner. So meaning that it's not on stack, it's not inside your SAP solution, it's sitting outside. You can then make use of that. And it's actually cool because if, say, for example, you've got a bunch of SAP solutions that you want to be able to build extensions for, instead of trying to do it on stack, you can also use the BTP ABAP environment for doing that and connect to all of these systems if you want. And then what else did I want to say? And then obviously that's when concepts like ABAP Cloud are going to come into play because that's all you can use in that environment. Okay. And then in terms of the SAP solutions that you can extend, it's not just the S4HANA. If you've got, for example, a SuccessFactors environment or a ECP or Employee Central Payroll environment, you can also create extensions for that as well. Okay. And obviously you then pick a language of choice. So for us, ABAPers will be the ABAP SAP BTP environment. And if you are more comfortable with Java and Node.js, then it can either be Cloud Foundry or Kima. So Cloud Foundry would be a bit easier to set up. And if you've got a very unique requirements, then Kima environment will then give you the flexibility and a bit more control in terms of how your stuff is implemented. Okay, and then another thing worth mentioning, so you'll see that the secure connection here, or secure connectivity, and that secure connectivity is facilitated by remote APIs that SAP publishes. So for all of the SAP solutions that are basically cloud solutions, SAP actually provides an API hub. So they publish an API hub, and let me just see if I have this open somewhere. Yeah, so this is the API hub. And basically on the API hub, you've got access to literally all sorts of products and APIs that SAP has published on here. And these APIs are stable, they won't change. And basically when you implement a solution using these APIs, you can rest assured that you won't be impacted by things like upgrades and stuff like that. If things do ever change, it will be communicated well in advance, and then you can migrate accordingly. So for example, you go into SuccessFactors and you go into APIs. Okay, my session is expired. See if I can just close this for now. So you basically get access to all sorts of things that has been published by SAP. So for example, there's OData APIs, and then you can get access to this. For example, if you want to look at employment information or employee profile or things like that, you get access to that. And then that's the API reference. You can see what data is available. You can actually try this out as well and test it from here. So this is a really cool thing if you've got cloud solutions and you want to see how you can create extensions, whether in ABAP or in other languages, but mainly in ABAP. And then here you've got the option for API consumption. And what this does is it basically gives you a nice step-by-step instruction of how to consume this API within your solution. So, for example, for if you were on BTP ABAP, then you can then generate a proxy using this, and it will basically give you nice step-by-step instructions of how to achieve this. So you'll be able to consume the API. And then let's get back to the slide. Okay. Okay, so that's extensibility and then side-by-side extensibility. So this is actually really nice because, like I mentioned, if you have, for example, on ERP and you've got a BTP environment and you want to start using your BTP environment for creating extensions, you can actually achieve the same even if you've got an on-prem system. You can create, you can use Cloud Connector for creating your destinations, and then you can consume services in the ABAP environment from your on-prem system as well. So it's nice if you want to innovate and make use of what's available on BTP, but your system is not on BTP as yet or on cloud. Okay, so that is extensibility and side-by-side extensibility. Now let's talk about the interesting stuff. So this is now the core stuff that we wanted to chat about. So ABAP Cloud. So we've spoken about ABAP BTP runtime, and we are now talking about ABAP Cloud. So what is actually ABAP Cloud? So ABAP Cloud is actually more of a development model for building cloud-ready business applications and services and extensions. So it's a way of building stuff, right? It's a model for developing software, and you'll see the components that makes up ABAP Cloud. But it's a new way of building solutions using ABAP. So instead of using classic ABAP development, ABAP Cloud is a new way of building solutions, and it sort of guides you to build solutions that are cloud ready. Because when you're using ABAP Cloud, you're sort of forced to build stuff that's cloud ready. You can no longer make modifications. You can no longer read tables directly. You have to use CDSs and stuff like that. So it's a new way of doing things, and it's a bit of a mind shift, to be honest. I found that a bit complex or awkward at the beginning, but you get used to it and you actually end up enjoying it. And when you have to do stuff in classic ABAP, it looks a bit weird. So very interesting. And we're going to talk about firstly where you can use ABAP Cloud. So currently ABAP Cloud is available in S4HANA, specific version of S4HANA. So your release needs to be, let me just see. So your on-prem system, it should be available on, and it's also available on private cloud as well. And then it's also available on public cloud. In fact, public cloud by default, that's all that is available to you. And then obviously it's available on BTP as well. Okay. So you can still do classic ABAP development on your on-premise for HANA system, and you can also do it on your private cloud edition, but you can no longer do it, or you can do it on public cloud, and you also can do it on BTP. So you have to use ABAP Cloud for building your solutions in those environments. So ideally, even if you are on these systems, you want to start making use of ABAP Cloud because that's basically best practice and it's recommended because it's better. It's gonna help keep your system clean and without any issues. So ideally, you want to move and start using ABAP Cloud because it's cross environment and it works quite well. So that's where you can use ABAP Cloud, and you'll see that your ECC and your ERP systems are not here. If you want to start using ABAP Cloud, but you don't have these systems, that's when that side-by-side extensibility, where you make use of BTP ABAP environment comes into play, and then you can connect that with your on-prem system using Cloud Connector, and then you can consume stuff from there and then create extensions in your BTP environment. Okay. And then this just covers the evolution of ABAP Cloud, where we started from an ABAP point of view. So prior to 2012, it was business as usual on the classic ABAP side, where we were just creating ABAP objects and we were using SE80 and SE24 to do stuff. And then 2012, ADT came into the picture, and we just saw a nice presentation from Thomas around the ADT. So if you're still using SE80 for doing your dev work, there's no need because you can use ADT even with your ERP system. So ADT came into the picture, and then 2015 S4HANA came into the picture as well. And we started seeing a lot of migration from your classic Dimpo screens to Safiori. And that's all we are seeing now. So if you're still building stuff using classic Dimpo, you need to start asking yourself questions, right? And then 2018, BTP ABAP environment came to the picture. So that's your steampunk environment. And that's basically ABAP on cloud, not ABAP Cloud, but ABAP environment on cloud. And you can use that for doing your side-by-side extensions where you can create solutions outside of your stack, and you just use secure connectivity for consuming stuff on stack. And then 2022, that's when the embedded ABAP environment came into the picture. So that's basically your embedded steampunk on S4HANA, basically, that came into the picture as well. And then that's the evolution of ABAP Cloud. Okay, so back to the model itself. So ABAP Cloud, like I mentioned, it's a model for building solutions, right? And the model is made up of a few components. So we're going to start about the programming model itself. So the programming model itself, as you can see, it consists of a couple of things. So the model is everything that you know. It's the ABAP language itself. It's things like CDSs or code data services. It's RESTful ABAP programming. So it's everything that's coding related that forms part of that programming model. And then obviously with that programming model, you can build certain types of applications. You can build your transactional applications. You can build your analytical applications. And then you can build integrations as well, right? And if you come from the Fiori world, these will seem very familiar. And then some of the components that are contained as well, you've got your reuse services and libraries. So things are different now. Example, you get stuff like application jobs. So it's no longer scheduling jobs the way you used to in the classic ABAP world. Now you get reuse services and libraries that you make use of for building your solutions and then scheduling your jobs and things like that. And then there's built-in qualities as well that help guide you to basically build good quality ABAP and also cloud compliant ABAP as well. So that forms part of the ABAP Cloud model as well. And then this model is complemented by a couple of things. So it's the lifecycle management, which is the regular ABAP design time and runtime environment around how objects are managed and transports and versioning and things like that. That forms part of your ABAP Cloud environment. And then there's tool sets that are provided basically for supporting you when you do your development. So these two sets are similar to what we saw with the different personas when we looked at the developer and the key user, for example. So there's a tool set for key users to enable them to be able to create extensions, and then for developers as well. So ADT, for example, is one of those tools that are used. Okay. So this basically is the module higher level. So this basically talks about what actually constitutes ABAP Cloud as a model. So like I mentioned, ABAP Cloud is not your BTP ABAP runtime environment. It's actually a model for building your ABAP extensions and logic going forward. And these are the components that make up the solution. Okay, so now you've seen all of these things. You, for example, don't have an S/4HANA system as yet, or even if you do, ABAP Cloud is not enabled as yet. You want to now jump into ABAP Cloud, and you want to start building stuff and experimenting as a developer. And where do you start, right? So like I mentioned, SAP provides a BTP runtime environment for ABAP, and it's actually available on trial as well. So I'll quickly just jump into that and just show you what that looks like. So this is my trial environment. Let me just refresh. Hopefully my session is not completely gone. Otherwise, I'll have to log in. Yeah, it's not gone yet. Okay, so you can go to this link. It's on the slide as well. So you can go to this link and you'll be able to create your trial environment. So your trial environment will give access to a lot of the BTP stuff that's available out there. So it's not just the ABAP Cloud environment. So when you go in there, you go to a trial account. And this is my trial account that I've created just now for doing this demo. And then on there, if you want to enable your BTP ABAP environment, you go to your boosters. And then there's a little booster here that will get you started. So basically, this would be the steps that you'd have to perform to get an instance of ABAP Cloud, ABAP BTP runtime environment. So you'll come in here, you'll enable this. Once you've enabled this, it will allow for you. I'm just going to jump forward just for a sec to show you something, and then I'll come back. So it will basically, just switch to my slide so that you see what I see. So like I mentioned, you'll start here, and then you will go into the booster. You'll navigate to the left here, go to booster like I showed you. And then you start the process. It will basically take a while. It will set up the environment. It will get it sorted for you. And then it will give you the option to download the service key. So the service key that you're going to download here is what you're going to use when you go into your Eclipse ADT. And that's how you're going to connect to your cloud environment, basically. So you'll click on download service key, and then once you are in Eclipse, you'll go ahead and say create an ABAP Cloud project, and then it will give you this little pop-up. And then from here, you'll then select SAP BTP ABAP environment, and then it will give you this. So this you'll then import, you'll navigate to the JSON file that you would have downloaded on the previous screen, click on import, and then that will get your system up and running. So for example, I've got a connection to an environment already. So you'll see that this is my trial environment that I'm connected to. I've already done the steps that I mentioned earlier. And then from here, you'll be able to then start learning ABAP Cloud, and you can start creating your web solutions and things like that. And it's quite nice because if you don't have access to a system that allows for you to do all of this, this would be the best place to start. Okay. So let me just go back to the slide. I skipped a couple of things. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the ADT side of things because I think that has been covered quite a bit, but I just wanted to mention, if you don't know where to start, so the first place that you're going to start, you're going to download Eclipse. If you haven't been using Eclipse as yet, you're going to download Eclipse, and then you're going to visit this link here. So this link will basically have instructions on how to set up your Eclipse for ABAP development. So that's the link right here. On here, you'll then see Eclipse software site, and then there'll be a bunch of info for where to start and how to get this set up. So you basically just copy this link, and then within your Eclipse environment, you'll go to help and say install new software, and then you paste that, and then you'll follow the wizard basically for doing the install. So once that is done, then you'll get access to all of the things that I was showing you now on Eclipse. So you'll then get access to this ABAP view, and then you'll be able to do your ABAP development from here. Okay. And then there's a couple of things that I'm not gonna cover today, but they are very important. Let me just go back to the slide, especially when you are getting started. So let's skip this, skip that, skip that, skip that. And the starting point obviously is your ABAP RESTful application programming model, which is very important. So this is the best way to build your solutions going forward. And this will be your starting point basically as a developer if you're getting into ABAP Cloud. And not only if you're getting into ABAP Cloud, actually, even if you're still doing your dev on your on-premise S/4HANA system, for example, this should be the way to go for building your applications going forward. And this basically is a programming model as well. So these are some of the stuff that make up that model basically. So RAP is defined as a set of concepts, tools, and languages, and a powerful framework to help developers to build innovative, cloud-ready, secure applications, local and web APIs, and to easily extend SAP applications on the ABAP platform in the cloud as well as on-premise. So the nice thing about RAP is that you'll see that right at the bottom here, RAP is standard. It's consistent whether you are on cloud or you are on-prem. So getting started with it is a no-brainer because it means that whatever you build using RAP going forward will be easily, sorry, my cursor is not showing. So I was pointing to this part. So getting started with RAP and prioritizing building your solutions using RAP is a no-brainer. It makes sense because it means that whatever you build is cloud ready, and should you want to migrate at a later stage, it'll be nice and easy for you to do that. And then it's usable as well. So it's a universal usable programming model, whether you are completely implementing a new solution or you migrating from an existing system to S/4HANA Cloud, then that makes sense. And then obviously, if you're still using classic Dimpo, like I mentioned, you need to change, right? You need to change your approach, and theory is the way to go, and that's what is used in, okay. And then these are just some of the resources that you can use for getting into RAP. There's a lot that's covered when you look at these links, and hopefully this will be useful. And that is basically it.